Morning, Harry.
Morning, JP. Morning, all.
Good morning.
So the first live streaming. It's a momentous event.
Yes.
Did we not do this
Morning,
in the last lockdown?
No, we've videoed it and posted it up on YouTube, but this is the first time we've actually live streamed.
Turn the top button up then.
Oh, Alistair, we've all got jackets on because we're actually, educated from the rural sector.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about that later.
I've been out working, Garrett.
So have I. Talking to the sheep.
Jeppy, if it looks like I'm not looking at the screen, it's because I'm looking at my other screen with all the notes up on it.
Yeah, same.
Yep, join the club.
I bet you're searching on Trade Me, Alistair.
They don't sell used mirrors on Trade Me.
Just a request, guys. Non-councillors and staff, if they're not participating, could they turn their screens off and the sound? It would actually help with the audio. Who else are we waiting for, Suzanne?
We've got our public participants here. I think you've got all your members because we've got a couple of apologies. So just go ahead and
Yep.
kick off in 1 minute.
Yep. Right, it's just clicked over 10 a.m. So if you're all in your starting blocks, aha, we're on action. So we'll get a start. Well, welcome all. We've got a pretty full agenda today, and we will need to keep to some form of a timetable, because there is another meeting after. We've got a little bit of wriggle room, but there's a lot of discussion to be had. So first up, I will call for apologies. I've got apologies from Pip and Rebecca. I don't think there's any others. Are the only two, aren't they? Yep. Someone like to move that we accept that, please, Alistair, the seconder. Garrick. You got that, Suzanne?
All good, thanks, GP.
Yep. Is there any conflicts of interest? No. Right. Public participation. Right. The order is Daphne, Don McCreary. I can't see Don here. And a late addition is Lee Carter. So first up, welcome, Daphne. You're on screen and your mute button is on. Oh, you're good. You're good to go. Okay. It's up to you.
Thank you. Namihi kia koutou I tēnei hui tōpa. Tēnā koutou katoa. All my items relate to the agenda pack today, starting with page 28, road stopping. You might remember my question to a previous road stopping about how the price was determined and the need for a stated methodology to be fair to all. I'm pleased to see now that the price relates to a market rate taking into account the value added to the property regarding subdivision. However, this is not a methodology and has one been agreed by this committee. I wonder if any light can be thrown on the purchase of the land in through 2010 for road widening, not that long ago, and the current proposed sale of the land in 2021. In an era of bicycle paths making places more friendly for pedestrians, especially along the heritage trail, has the committee considered this? Page 39, recommendation for Hinakora Road. Recommendation number 2 states that all recommendations identified in the report will be carried out within existing council budgets. Can we just confirm if that means all items will be completed? Just one sec. Can you just put it on hold for a second? I'll dog out. Sorry about that. Yeah, can you confirm if that means all items will be completed as they fall within the budget, or if a recommendation falls outside of the budget, it won't be completed? It's just a bit unclear. It'd be disappointing if it was understood differently by parties. Could you clarify this? Page 96, the Three Waters reform, next step. The report identifies a short time frame and a lot of information and an 8th of September workshop. Given the importance of information sharing and transparency, could the committee arrange for this workshop to be recorded on Zoom and shared online? Page 113, amenities and the report about parks. The long-term plan consultation, big decision number 5, was passed. Concept of developing a wheels park on council-owned land, proposing to use 1 million from the restricted reserve phased across years 1 to 3. Page 44 and 48 of the long-term plan, I can find no reference to this project, but it relates to community facilities. Can you point me to the confirmation of this project in the long-term plan? On the 25th of July, a Facebook post stated that final concept plans have been drawn up, focus groups happened and feedback received. And they'll be finalising plans to hand over to South Warraba District Council to put out to tender. They, being a community group and obviously fans of the project. In a press report on August the 12th, it stated that $1 million had been allocated in the long-term plan to get the project started, with further funding needed to complete the project, not exactly as consulted and approved on. A statement from the staff member in the same report said it would be great to get a shovel turned prior to Christmas. That's only 4 months away. There's no mention in the press or this meeting of a project plan being created and approved by council, which I presume would include a governance process for design and developer, an engagement plan, a budget, how much has been spent so far, a timeline, whatever is in a project plan. Page 105 of the long-term plan states that the district property reserve is $24,000 in the hole, with an expectation of it being positive after the sale of a property. Maybe an update on this would be useful to the committee, if in fact this is the reserve being used for the project. Reserves seem to change names in various documents. So could this committee ask, who is managing this project, this budget, and the spending of $1 million or $1 million plus of ratepayer money? Page 57, action plans. Given that some of these items date to early 2019, it would seem like this could do with a review. Council have indicated in the past that staff are busy, and from experience, having to manage an action plan dating back 2 years wastes a lot of time and gives a false impression of action.
One minute, Daphne.
And lastly,
I'm sorry, Daphne, you've cut out there for some reason.
what would a dashboard for other? The learnings may prove useful as you head into another high-profile $1 million project. Thank you.
Okay. I think we all missed a little bit of your last point, but if you could send that to us, obviously you've got it written down there. We'll pick up on the last bit.
Yeah, related to the fact that there's no report on the Waihinga Centre report being approved and passed the committee.
Okay,
Yeah, Jimmy, could definitely
get
just
that
read
to
out that
us.
last paragraph again.
Big pun?
Could definitely just read out that last paragraph again, because, well, we didn't hear it, so.
Sorry. And lastly, what would be page 134, the dashboard for other? The long-awaited report, which dates back to 2019 on the Waihinga project, was ready for office review in June with no due date. Is there an update, as the dashboard page other seems to be missing from the reporting today? And these learnings may prove useful as you head into another high-profile $1 million project. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Time's up, Daphne, but if you could forward us a copy of that, that'd be great. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to Lee. Could you unmute yourself, Lee? Otherwise, we won't understand a word.
Jeppy, I think we've got Don join us. Don, if you're there, do you want to just...
is he there? Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
right, Lee, could you just go on hold for a minute and we'll get Don on board. Donnie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can't see you, but you know, that doesn't matter. I think I remember what you look like. But look, you got 5 minutes, Donnie, and we're all ears, so it's all yours.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm not going to be 5 minutes. I suppose, so you'll be aware what it's about. It's about the Hinnakura Road situation, and we just received the report for the road. Yeah, is it the landslide remediation report that has just come through from Greater Wellington Regional Council? We eventually got that off someone from council, sort of communications, but it still wasn't. It was a bit clunky. Like I received it earlier. They had it a lot earlier, and we were told we were going to get it straight away. And so, I mean, communications haven't been good right through. But anyway, so all I really want to say is hopefully none of we've made submissions at the committee meetings, and there's been a lot of emails and phone calls from the district, and I just hope that hasn't fallen on deaf ears and it's still well recorded within the council. Would that be correct? Or?
Yeah, no, they hadn't fallen on deaf ears. Carry on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Cool. And just one thing in the report I was concerned about. I've just spotted that it might not be quite as big a mistake as I thought, but it's just in relation to the movement of the ground. It did occur in 2020, and I see here it is included in this report as March 2020. And I've got emails that went to council in June 2020 from people in the district, and they were told that they were going to get communication on the remedy of the road throughout the year, and they didn't receive anything until 2021 when this next thing's occurred, and there hasn't been anything done other than just patch metal work on the road, in the summer that we had, which is the time when you carry out dirt works, obviously. And now this report tells us that, yes, we've got to wait till summer to get it to be able to do any real work on it. So I want them to include in this report that there's been a lack of correct work carried out over the last summer after it was significantly moved last winter. Is that possible?
Well, we'll be discussing this later on, but we're taking your points down, Donnie.
Yeah, cool. So that needs to be included, that there's been something major lacking in operation of carrying out, sort of looking after the road, basically. So I always felt moving forward, we want to get confidence back that the council's going to carry out its work, and look after the ratepayers like Hinakura ratepayers and all the others, and carry out this work so we can just get on with farming and or doing whatever jobs we're meant to be, because I've spent a lot of time, and other people in the district have also, actually following things up, and we've probably made slight progress by doing that, but it shouldn't have to happen. Hopefully, you know, like hopefully we can get back to that situation and things get remedied. So yeah, yeah, that's probably all I've really got. The slump is the major factor of keeping Hinakura open to everyone else, and but also all the other roading through the district and other things, you know, are really neglected, and as ratepayers, you know, we're really starting to question where our spend's going, sort of thing. And yeah, and one thing I had in my submission was, you know, a sign of how we get neglected was a few years back, all the holding paddocks were sold with no, you know, and that was pushed through sort of without any consultation, or they showed me afterwards that they'd sent something, but that was all sort of hidden in smoke screen. So and that money went into the Waihinga Centre, which means nothing to farming. So anyway, but that's all in submission I made at that committee meeting anyway. So probably, I think that's me really. Just hope report.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that, Donnie. Now, you're going to hang around and be there when we discuss the Hinakura Road. It's on the agenda. Hopefully, it'll only be about 10 or 15 minutes away.
Okay, so that'd be 10 or 15 minutes time, will it? Yeah,
Well, yeah.
Get on. Yeah,
hopefully. Hopefully. Now, does anyone else have any questions for Donnie? We've still got a little bit of time, I think, Suzanne, haven't we?
You're free to ask any clarifying questions. His time is up.
Anyone clarify anything?
Yeah, just one thing that comes to mind is you know, the work getting carried out. Can we have deadlines and action? You know, really see progress and reported what's happening, because right now it still feels like a few bits of paper of report that can just get unacted on.
Yep. Okay, we'll take that point. Now, a lot of that may come clear on when we discuss it. We're going to have regional council involved with it too, David Boone. So Harry, Tim and David may clarify that for you, the timelines.
Cool. And yeah,
Okay.
like, happy they've done a report. The only other thing, sorry, is just where the water ends up is really important. And there's a suggestion in that. Are we allowed to talk when they're talking later? No.
No, but we'll take your views on board, and also through our comms now, we'll keep you up to date that all the residents out there and the community board and the councillors as to how we're going. So
yeah, cool. Because if you remember, the water getting diverted to a dam that's currently there is a better place for the water, and it goes to a north-facing slope and it's more stable. That's just my quick take on it. But anyway, cool.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Don. I hope you can tune in for our discussion around the Hinakura Road. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Chippy. Cheers. Thank you.
Righto, Lee. After that false start, you're on board.
Hey, Jeppy, how you going? Okay, so I'm just reading from another screen, so sorry if my head's tilted another way. Thanks for letting me talk at the 11th hour this morning, Jeppy. I'm talking on point 2 agenda item C1, the proposed Bidwell's Cutting Road and Moiki Road intersection upgrade. Many of us didn't actually get to see this paper until about 9 o'clock last night. So early this morning, there were quite a bit of conversations. So yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of members of the Moiki community and as an owner of a property down at Moiki. The 3 key points and feedback from the Moiki community who've been living here for generations and newcomers to the recent new development Manukawiri Way are: point 1, None of the three options actually that you've got in your paper today actually solves the critical safety issue that currently stands at the Moiki intersection. And that is, you can't see the oncoming traffic coming from Greytown when you're driving from the Martinborough towards Greytown. And you can't see the traffic coming from Greytown when pulling out of the Moiki Road. And this is because there's a great hump in the road to the west of where the street light is proposed in your option 3. There is a blind spot there both in and out of Moiki Road, and without removing the hump opposite the entry of the Moiki Road intersection, it's always going to be a bit dodgy. Further feedback is that just hold on a moment, just doing a bit of a switch here. So the hump is the key issue of all the problems of Moiki Road intersection. Further feedback is a stop sign is better than a give way sign. There actually isn't any sign up there at the moment that I checked this morning. This is from someone who's come in from Wellington and bought a property down here. Although either way, you can't see around the corner. A merging lane going south and or a separate turning lane going north are worthy consideration. In option 2, there is a question going on at the moment on the passing lanes, in particular the one going towards Martinborough. You wouldn't be able to pass tractors and slow heavy machinery, so traffic heading to Martinborough would be held up until they get to the bottom of the cutting. Option 3, the street light idea supposedly warns off traffic of the intersection approach, although at night you can see the oncoming lights as you exit Moiki anyway. Personally, I wouldn't like to see a light in the country because it adds light pollution to an area where we're promoting dark skies, so it's a definite no from me. The island in option 3 is an absolute definite no, because it'll make it difficult for agricultural machinery to get in and out of that intersection. There is the Kershaw agricultural business in Moiki Road, and also other farmers, including other farming contractors, using this road on a regular basis with heavy machinery. We're not also sure what the proposal of the island really meant. There's no explanation on that, but it's a definite no from us. Getting on to our second point, while we appreciate the work that has been put into this, some of us would like to point out that no one was consulted within the Moiki community that we are aware of. This would have been helpful both to us and to council in order for appropriate options to be put up that would solve the key issues and be more fit for purpose. Unfortunately, council have done all this work, but it doesn't actually solve the problems or help us. Point 3, this is the bigger issue.
1 minute, Lee, you've got 1 minute.
That council need to address now the Moiki Road itself going down the hill off the intersection. Mr. Kershaw commented this morning that if council don't address our road issue, which has been brought up with council on numerous occasions, and also a meeting on site with Mrs. Kershaw and the mayor, that council will be dealing with a similar situation such as Hinakura Road, which you have on the agenda today. We thank you for listening to us at such short notice, and we hope that you take into consideration our points and concerns. That's it.
Right, thank you, Lee. Now, is there anyone any points of clarification? No. Well, thank you, Lee. Look, as you know, we'll be discussing these later on in the agenda. Oh, sorry, Alistair.
Sorry. Yeah, Lee,
Alistair,
thank you for that. I've been looking at the 3 options as you've been talking, so I can see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You said you've all been chatting and that nobody was spoken to. Obviously, you've got some views. Your community have some views about what is needed.
Yeah.
it would be helpful if you actually, while you've got the chance to put those on the table to us.
Well, what is needed is the key one that we're talking about is the hump across the road from the intersection needs to be removed in order to be able to see oncoming traffic coming into the intersection and going out of the intersection. There's a serious blind spot there, and it happens just as you're coming in to turn into the Moiki intersection. Now,
are you talking from the Greytown side or the Martborough side?
Yeah, from the Greytown side.
On that bend.
Yeah. So that's the key point. In order for people who are pulling into Moiki Road and exiting, often you'll get up there and you'll pull out and a car's literally already on your tail because you haven't seen it where that hump is. And it's a bit just difficult to explain unless you're there on site to look at it, or you're driving yourself in and out of Moiki. But that's our key point. So that was the first point I brought up, that absolutely has to be addressed in order for that intersection to become safe. Really, that's all that needs doing, other than the Moiki Road itself.
Right.
Okay.
Well, thankfully,
Thanks, Lee.
and then we will discuss this as we get onto that issue, and we'll have people that know more about it than I guess we do. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Righto, cheers. Okay, is there any actions required from public participation, given that both Donnie and Lee's concerns, and to some degree Daphne's concerns, are coming up later on in the agenda? Harry, do you think there's anything else we need to discuss there?
The only comment I'd make is in terms of the Waihinga Lessons Learned report, we're hoping to get that to council. The next council meeting on the 15th. The agenda was just too full with the items we had. So that's the only other item that was there.
Okay, thank you. Righto, moving on. Any extraordinary business? No. Now, minutes for confirmation. We have them all obviously in front of us. The minutes from the 7th of July 2021. Would someone like to move that we receive these? Ross and Alistair. You got that, Suzanne?
Thanks, JP.
All in favour? All right, good. Right, is there any corrections or alterations to those minutes? Garrick, you're on mute. Did you want something?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It's just that in B1, the correct date there for the Longwood Water Race is actually 1890s.
Good God. Okay. You got that, Suzanne?
It was built as a privately owned water race by the Farrisons in the 1890s, and then was taken over by the council in 1936. It's important because it means it actually is a heritage site.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the correct date was mentioned in the meeting, but let me take a look at that and I'll just record what was actually said in the meeting.
Yep, I'll send it through, but anyway, it's 1890s. Thank you.
Any other, Alistair? Yes.
Yeah, JP, thank you. I'll just look at item C4. Since we had our last meeting, there's been a number of floods down the Taraniko River. I think it's probably reasonably important that we keep getting regular updates on the state of that pipe for Featherston, because if that breaks, we've got a major problem. So it would be really nice to know what Wellington Water are getting a monthly update on where we are with that, particularly after any flood event.
Yep.
GP, I just point out that is on the update on the Partnership Operations Report.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Okay, oh, sorry, I must have missed that. Thank you.
Right, we're all happy with that. Cheers, we'll move on. Right, we are now up to B1, which is recommendations from the Martborough Community Board. Mel, are you hearing me?
Yes, yes, I am, GP.
Okay,
I'm
right.
here.
We'll let you crank into this, and
GP, just sorry, I know you've just done your notes from your previous meeting, but I presented at your previous meeting about a lot of these road recommendations, and they were going to be taken to the next council meeting after we spoke. That was the outcome from my participation. However, I can see that hasn't occurred, just from it's missing from the minutes. That what we discussed, because remember I spoke about the innovating streets and a number of issues that were happening in Martinborough. Anyway, but I'm happy to speak to what we have here. Just wanted to point that out from the previous meeting, missing from the minutes. So some of this will be repetitive. So I hope you don't mind, but I certainly do want to see it go into the agenda for consideration by council for safety measures for Martinborough.
Yeah, we'll get some clarification on that soon, but you carry on with what you got, and I've got a note on that.
Fantastic. Well, so you'll note that I just want to speak to recommendation 1, which actually arose from the public meeting that we held here in Martinborough regarding innovating streets. Now, in the history for the Martinborough Square, Martinborough Soldiers Memorial Square, so because changes to the square in the past have only been able to be done by change in legislation, for management of it. So one of the things that was put through was that anything that happens on the square needs to, on one portion of the square, is meant to be replicated around the square to ensure that all sides remain the same. So that is where this first number 1 comes up, is that so Mate Higginson was saying that when they were doing those roading works on the square, that they had that they had agreement that the work that was done on the shoulders at the 2 gateways, so one at the termination of Kitchener Street, one at the termination of Jellicoe Street, so outside Payne and Kershaw's and opposite the hotel there. So that work was meant to be done on the other 2 shoulders. And the only work that has actually been done is that they put a slope down towards the pedestrian crossings, and there's a little white pipe that you can actually see it if you have a look at those 2 other 2 entranceways into the square at the termination of Cambridge Road and Oxford Street. So that is where this has come from, is, if we need to or are actually required to make those changes to those other 2 sides, if that could please be looked at. I believe that would actually resolve the safety issues that we are currently experiencing on those 2 intersections at those pedestrian crossings. So I spoke about that last time, but that the built-out shoulders solved the safety issues for the pedestrian crossings at Kitchener Street and at Jellicoe Street. And I do believe that built-out shoulders, so we can see people, see children on their scooters and things like that before they enter into the roadway, was the really big thing. So that could resolve itself just by actually following that first step on the square. So then the other road safety recommendations that we have there are from my last talk with you. So there was the temporary low-sitting roundabout at the junction of State Highway 53, Kitchener Street and Princess Street. So this is something that we saw down in Gore that was allowed to be sitting on state highways, and the way that they sit, it's actually it's quite easy to remove if it doesn't create the results that you want. But essentially it was the roundabouts and the changes to each signage at each intersection as you're coming up to that, as you come up to that intersection at each corner, so that it shows roundabouts, a roundabout as it coming up instead of give way or an intersection information. So it forces people to change and slow their road behaviour at that, well, at that point where we know there's always accidents. People are either crashing into Hank and Jocelyn's or over across into Considine Park. So we do have historically a number of times and accidents that have occurred there. So the other ones, and I can see, let's have a quick look. Yep, which were the ones that I had spoken to earlier. Yeah, so they hadn't been forwarded to council, so they're being asked to be reviewed by you all now. Seems to be what the recommendation is there. So particularly, I just would like to say again that this is our first time reading it. We haven't been asked for expansion on those, or to sit with anyone at council to show them what those issues are or where we are actually seeing them. So that's something, again, where I have just heard it said by Lee around the Moiki community. We know with our Hinakura community that it's happening as well. And it just seems to be that loss of that rural championship voice is just seems to be a bit of a concern. So where we used to accept that officers couldn't be everywhere, and when you would hear from these people within the community that is your advice to action, you know, and to make movement, and I guess just to be taken seriously, and not just to be put aside. And I think the really important thing is follow up with that. So when people do contact into the council, that they just need to hear something back, what the next result is. Too often when it's silence, it's always understood, people believe I hear nothing, nothing's happening. So you know, that's one of those things that I think needs to be considered. But certainly around a lot of these safety issues that council is being brought to the council table, it's hard for you to, I guess it's hard for it to make the right decisions if the voices of the people who are utilising those roads and assets and infrastructure, if their voice isn't heard. So I know that there had been talk about having a meeting with the Hinakura community, but and the Martinborough Community Board out there, and that hasn't occurred before you guys are being presented with another report. So I just want to point it out that it was missing in the Innovating Streets, and it's why it fell over, to ensure that we're doing the right things for our communities. The first thing we need to do is hear them, is go out and listen. Certainly that's the thought here from the Martinborough community. Now, I'm glad that we're very glad to hear that the Waihinga Centre lessons learned is also going through to the council table. So that's great. So it just means we were concerned whether we would get the final results back at our table in time. So that's really great that Harry was able to clarify that from Daphne's public participation as well. So I guess I see here the officers' recommendations. So they've got here about the speed reduction outside the school and the the kindergarten. This consultation plan with the community for the end of 2021. So, okay, yeah, I guess a lot of these issues are quite long-standing and outstanding issues. So all I would like to say is that when it comes to safety, and when we talk about safety, that we ensure what the community is saying are your close calls, are your sites for oversight and requiring some oversight and by council. But in conjunction, we want to work with you. Our communities want to work with you. Safety in our communities is the outcome we want. Nobody is, wanting to put any barriers to that. But we just want to ensure that that is done in a consultative way. And yeah.
Okay. I've just been going through the officer's recommendations, and Harry, is there anything else you want to add to this?
Just starting from the top. So you'll recall at the so Mel's first comment was she thought this was going to council. You'll see in the second paragraph that what the Assets and Services Committee was asked before going to council to review the recommendations alongside our officer commentary, which is why we've put this report together. So you've got the views of officers and recommendation to the suggestions. Because I mean, the trick here is to identify what the safety issue is, and then look at what the kind of range of solutions could be. Often people will say, we think if you did this, it would improve safety. And there may be nothing wrong with that, but actually it may not equally. And equally, there are design standards, that council has to comply with and should around traffic control devices and those types of things. So just running through so we wanted to bring this all together for you. So you had a sense of, we had suggestions and what the officers' views are. So if I just run through them very quickly, the pedestrian crossings, yes, that is on our radar, absolutely. We're doing an audit of all the pedestrian crossings in the district, and they'll be prioritised according to their safety risk and the budgets that we have for them. So we need to look at them all and make an assessment across all three towns, which are the most important ones to fix based on the risk. And so you see that there. So that work is programmed and is budgeted. And equally, we will consult.
Sorry, Harry. Sorry. Just when you say based on risk, will there be discussion in communities to actually find where, to ensure that they are going forward at the places that actually have those highest risks?
We can do that, Mel, absolutely. I was just going to say that the outcome of that audit and the plan for improvements will be provided, and we can make sure, it says provided to the Asset Service Committee as well as community boards. So that opportunity is there. So that's number one. Number two, the Kitchener Street roundabout. So the roundabout that Mel referred to was part of an Innovating Streets, and it was basically a painted roundabout. Wakakotahi do have standards for permanent structures in terms of roadways. So anything that we did in that area, we would have to have agreement from Wakakotahi to do, and we're certainly happy to raise that as a discussion, because you have to look at the level of traffic, the impact the heavy vehicle uses, etc., etc., etc. But so we're happy to just raise that with Wakakotahi, determine the feasibility to do that. Going on to the speed and visibility outside the schools. Again, it's what's the safety risk, and then what are the solutions to do that. The officer's view is first of all, speed bumps. Well, actually, probably don't need to read it all through, but speed bumps create noise, and so any consideration of that, you'd want to talk to the residents very specifically because of the noise risks that pose. Cat size, that they're not part of a design standard for pedestrian crossings, and speed reduction is probably the most preferred method, and which would be picking up in our comprehensive speed review, as Mel has mentioned. The winery cycle trail, that's unbudgeted, of course. It was raised. It's been raised on a number of occasions, and equally in the alcohol control bylaw, about what the different methods for controlling, particularly cyclists who may have imbibed too much. And so there's a number of things that we need to consider in that area, but it is unbudgeted. And that does, those types of things do have a large check to them. That's a summary of the staff views. Tim, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, no, Harry. I think you covered most of it. Certainly, as part of
bit. You're a bit quiet.
Hang on. Is that better?
Yep, not much. Turn the volume up a bit.
It was time. No, I think we covered most of it. There's certainly the speed review. There are standards for outside both urban and rural schools, which are lower than the posted speed around the urban streets, and that will come into control. Apart from that, it's pretty straightforward. Just noting the cost there, 190,000 for the wineries cycle trail. That's only for the Hungaroa and Piratonga roads. It's not all the way down to TK Winery. So you'd have to look at double that if you want to get down there.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Tim, what would the speed be outside schools if it was if we followed the speed review guideline? Is it 30 k's?
Probably 30 k's.
Yeah.
Certainly no more than 40 anyway. We can go to 40 at the moment, as long as all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But yeah, it'll be down to 30. Hopefully, and that's the urban schools, and probably down to 50 or 60 in rural zones.
Pam, you had a question.
Thanks, Jeppy. Tim, in the wineries cycle track, were you considering joining that with the New York Street up to Hungaroa Piratonga Road at all in that 190 cost that you've put in there?
No, it's just that section of road identified there, so it's Piratonga and Hungaroa.
Okay, thanks.
Alistair, you have a question?
Yeah, Tim, I'm not quite sure how this equates, but kindergartens, I'm not sure whether the kindergarten we're talking about in this paper is a public kindergarten or a private business, but what's the story with private kindergartens that pop up and speed limits around those? Is that a council responsibility, or is that because there's a lot more of them popping up over the district?
Speed limits are certainly a council responsibility, Alistair. And I suppose if as part of the consultation process, we identify the ones we are aware of. We're not aware of them all. It will be addressed lock, stock and barrel. And as Harry mentioned early on, whatever we do has got to be similar through the whole district, and schools and kindergartens would be treated the same.
Because I suppose just thinking outside of Martinborough, when you think on State Highway 2, you've got Ladybirds. Is it Lady? I think it's Ladybirds, isn't it, Anne? I think it's called. Yeah, and that's outside of the town centre where they were talking about lowering that speed limit. So then you're going to have multiple speed changes up and down State Highway 2, which seems absolutely ridiculous. It's probably going to be causing more problems than solutions.
Yeah, and that's State Highway 2, so that's sort of outside our ballpark, and they're consulting at the moment. So if those education centres want to be considered differently, they should put their two bob in.
Ross.
Look, yep, transmitting now. How do you read?
Yep.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
I the officer's report that most of these safety items are already under action. Is that a fair assumption, Tim or Harry?
Yeah.
No. So the ones are definitely under action, but the two aren't. We'd have to, is the Kitchener Street roundabout. We need to talk to Kotahi about it. That would be the action. But it's not something that we've got planned to do, and obviously it's not our remit, it's Kotahi's. And similarly, the cycle track, it's something we're looking at, but it's not in the program of work because we haven't actually budgeted that.
Sure. So just to follow on, now of these, the safety concerns that have been raised by a community board need to be taken very seriously by us as a committee and of course by council. But what are we asked to do when the report requires us to consider these? Should we move these points to the action items folder?
Well, the recommendation, Ross, is having considered this, is you endorse the recommendations to council, but note that particularly the winery cycle track is not a planned program of work. All the other ones we can action without necessarily a resolution to council. It's essentially it.
Yep.
Thanks, Harry.
Alex, you had a question.
Yeah, certainly. With regards to recommendation 2, Waka Kotahi have actually delayed their budget for low risk, low cost items such as a roundabout on a state highway in a rural area. So we were unable to even raise that with them until at least later on in September. But I also know there's a massive amount of pressure on that fund given Waka Kotahi's funding status at the moment, being short a number of $1 billion. So we can see, I will certainly raise that, and if you want to adapt that action item in the regional road transport forum, and raise that along with the roundabout that has been raised for Greytown.
Thank you. Okay, now Mel, regarding the meeting with the Hanakura residents, we will be discussing that when we discuss the road. I know Alex was keen to have a meeting out there, but I think that we need to get all our ducks in a row, get an understanding of what needed to be done and the timeline, and then we can have a meeting. So we'll cover that later on. So we'll go Garrick and then Pam.
Thanks, Jim. Just a quick one, Tim, while you're there. Would now be an appropriate time to include some of those other rural schools? Are we considering those at this stage, or are they being put as a separate issue? I'm thinking of sort of Pirinoa and Kotara and places like that.
Actually, I can answer that, Garrick. We would be, as part of the speed review, it is across the entire district, so it would include rural schools.
Further to that, both those schools at the moment have got 40k signs outside them during pick up and drop off time.
Very good. Pam, you had a question.
Yes, it's to Tim again, Jeffy. With that winery cycle track, Tim, you're looking at obviously the 22-23 budget to look at anything in that field. So would we be able to add into that the area from New York Street up to the corner with Nelson's Road and Puratonga Road there as part of that safety works in doing that work long term? Because I think more people in town are using that area as well as the actual wineries road. So just thought it's not as big as some of the other areas, but it's certainly a walking and a cycling area that we get a majority of people using that piece of the road. Thanks.
You know, Pam, we can lay up estimates for whatever's required, and also if you're going to do that, you'd also look at probably from Princess Street down the state highway to the vineyards down there.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's just a cycle. There's no footpath there at all.
I think that's the area I was meaning. Yeah.
Right, Karen, you have.
Thanks, Jeffy. Yeah, I think I've been talking to Tim about this as this has been raised, as we say in the report, for some time. But I think the considerations would be broader. But we'll be looking at all of the issues that present from the cyclists and from tourism, and that's why we have talked about it through the alcohol bylaw discussions. So we'll be identifying what the issues are and the options for addressing those, and what is the preferred option for going forward. A cycle track may not be the better option. So I think what I think this council, this committee would perhaps want to do is give a direction to officers to actually carry out investigations to the nature of the problem, and come back to the committee with a broad set of options for addressing the problem.
Yep, good. Okay, look, now time's moving on, and I see Mel, I've only just spotted it.
Sorry, sorry, Jeffy. I just actually had a quick question, and probably Tim could answer this for me. But one of the big safety issues that we have at the moment that could be quite I don't know if it's a simple fix or not, but outside the kindergarten by the school, so people coming along the heavy traffic bypass from Princess Street, turning around onto and then they shoot down Robert Street because they see those big yellow signs saying that there's a school coming up, which are at the opposite sort of the baths, the swimming pool, and then they come around and then they think they can just shoot down Robert Street to get away from it. Now, unfortunately, on the second block of Robert Street, the big yellow sign that says 40 kilometres and that there's children in the area. So it has gone onto that second, into that second block, but because it jogs to the left, it's not a straight thoroughfare there. So when those cars come through, that sign, that fluorescent yellow sign that's so easy to see, can't be seen by those cars in that immediacy where there's actually going to be kindy kids. So I wondered if it could be pulled forward into the first block instead of on the second block of between Weld Street and Gay Street, if it actually came back to Dublin Street, Grey Street block outside the kindergarten on Robert Street. Can those signs be moved, Tim? I mean, is it really hard, or I don't know?
No, they're just ground planted with a concrete around them. They can be moved, but generally the sign placing is in advance of the establishment, set distances, but they can be moved. It just gives people a bit less time to react.
Yeah, I just
just note that recommendation 5 here is request officers investigate options to slow traffic on Robert Street outside the kindergarten. We could pick that up as part of addressing the safety risk now.
Yeah. If it's a simple thing, but it is, people can turn that corner and put their foot down, and little kids go bump, and because they're kindy kids too, so they're not school kids. So toddlers, as you know, can be pretty notorious for slipping mum's hand or whatever. So, yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
We are under the pump for time. I'll just one more quick question. Alex, you had a question.
Yeah, it was just more of a comment. I think that Harry already pulled up that, those sorts of issues or off-the-cuff comments regarding safety can be addressed to Harry for implementation by the rating team. So, yep.
And I think we've had pretty good discussion around this, and most things are in hand. And Harry and Tim have explained what we're about to do. I think we're going to have to move on. We're running 20 minutes late. And our next item is C1. which is the intersection. Yeah, but the cutting page 10 and 20 to 27. So first, would someone like to move that we receive?
Sorry, could I stop you there, Mr. Chairman? Are we going to recommend any of those previous recommendations to council, or what did the committee want to do with those?
Well, Harry, you discussed that most of them didn't need to go to be a recommendation to council. The only one there was the cycling trail. Was that correct?
Well, there is a series of recommendations. They're not just about going to council, Jeppy. So I just suggest you have a look at, we've got the recommendation 1 and 2. And I think you just, and you've got the recommendations from the Martinborough Community Board, but the recommendations are to receive the recommendations from the Community Board and consider them. But I don't think there's anything that actually formally needs to go to council at this stage.
No, you're right. Yeah, okay. Right, Suzanne, are you happy with that?
Yes, if you're happy with that, Mr. Chair, just if we can receive the report, we haven't got a mover and a.
Would someone like to move that we receive that report? Alistair and Garrick. Got that? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Right, we're moving on to our next item, which is C1. And could someone move that we receive the report, please? Alistair, second, I'll second it. Right, now we've all read it. And Harry, is there anything you wanted, or Tim want to discuss about this before?
Well, so the report's in sort of essentially 3 parts. One is there's specific recommendations that relate to the intersection and the footpaths around the Bidwell's Cutting Road improvements, which is we're asking for the committee to make you consider and decide what to do in terms of recommending to council. Yes. The other 2 items are essentially for information, saying these are works that we are considering, basically depending on what funding we get from Waka Kotahi. Yep. And that's the $1 million question. And I'm sure Tim is happy to answer some of the questions that Lee raised around sight lines and things around Moeki Road. But the substantive item is around the council wants to make a decision to progress the Bidwell's Cutting road improvements.
Yeah, 5 Rivers.
Brian?
Yeah, hang on. Now, Harry, you got that email from me that came through from Graham?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And so look, as we refine, so Graham, I'm just trying to, sorry, let me just pull this up. So there were some concerns around some of the design suggestions that were here under the Scheme C, which we would pick up. We'd have a discussion with them. There were comments around a barrier from Main Street around the Bidwells because many cars have gone through that corner. So really about barriers. There was concern about the location proposed for the crossing. Is it too close to the corner? And also the speed around the corner for people. We've had some concerns raised with us, which of course will be part of the, as we progress the scheme assessment, we talked to Graham and the community board.
Okay, Anne, you had a point?
Yeah, it's about when you talk to the community board. The Bidwell's Cutting Plan, CO1, pedestrian access and safety improvements to 5 Rivers Hospital. To date, there's been no public consultation. On August the 4th, the Greytown Community Board member Graham Gray asked to see the development plans and for Greytown Community Board to be kept informed of all developments. This has not happened. And in fact, when we heard about this meeting, that was the first time that we have seen these plans. So the community board has not been included. We have not been able to have a voice in terms of what
has happened. We've had an extra community board meeting on August the 18th when we passed recommendations on speed reductions and on the WAG submissions. So it could have been brought forward then, but again, that opportunity was not taken. So we are concerned that the community boards are not being included. We're being told what has happened, but we are not part of the process. And therefore, democracy has not prevailed. I'm also concerned that Kuranui College will be informed and will be engaged once the preferred options have been passed. Again, there's no consultation with the community, and this needs to happen.
Are you doing school stuff? You guys want?
Yeah. Right. Okay, Alex, you wanted to reply to that? Yes.
Yeah, certainly. And if you want to turn off your microphone, in respect to that, this is the first time the Assets and Service has seen this information. So I don't think there's been time for it to be tabled at any community board or public consultation because it's only just been received with respect. So now we have seen some options. It's able to be distributed and for comment from other groups. But my comment, though, is with regards to practicality, it doesn't look like that there's a connection between either Wakeland Street or Hospital Road with the proposed footpath. But so that concerns me that really, even though we're doing 80–90% of the work, there's also, it's an unfinished project until such time as a connection to another seal area. Tim, would you be able to comment on that?
Yeah, the plan was just to highlight Bidwell's Cutting Road. As you see in the financial considerations, there are notes there with regard to footpath from Hospital Road to Bidwell's Cutting Road. So it has been incorporated in the estimates. It's just not shown on the Bidwell Cutting plan.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tim. That answers my question.
Harry, have you any, can you enlighten us what the next steps are with this before we...
Yeah, I'll just respond to Anne's comment. So you'll recall that this started at the previous Planning and Regulatory Committee, where the committee asked us, so there was a planning issue, and they asked to have this report referred to Assets and Services. So we brought that straight away. So this is the appropriate place to bring this work. We have something now we can actually go and talk to the community about. And so we only got this work done urgently at the request of the committee. And so you have the information about what's proposed. That's not the final say. Obviously, we want to consult with the community and the community board just to make sure that there's nothing we've missed or those types of things. But the trajectory was projected by the Planning and Reg Committee, asking for it to be brought to this committee so we can commission the scheme assessments, etc.
So what you're meaning there, Harry, that we probably don't need to recommend that we go with that particular plan, or recommend the budget at this stage until it has gone out. Is that what you're saying?
No. So remember, it's a scheme assessment. It's just simply saying this is it's an outline. It's like the architect drawing before you actually go and do the specific design. So if you want to progress, basically, essentially what you're saying is, look, we accept the concept and whether you want to commit funding to doing that, so that we can get on with it. That's really the question. So the detail we'll work through with the community and the community board.
Yep. So the plan, we don't actually settle on a plan until we've had a discussion with the community boards and other relevant interested parties. We just what I'm trying to say is we recommend that we go with a plan for Bidwell Cutting improvements.
Yep.
With changes, and then we recommend a budget of 226,000. I guess the concern there is if we go out to the community and find that we got to make more changes, it may alter the budget.
We can always come back if that's the case, Jeppy. I mean, the thing here is that this is standard process. You know, you come up with a concept, and then you've got something to go and talk to the community about. If we just go out to the community and say, what do you want to do at Bidwell's Cutting Road? We'll get 3,000 different views. So this is just part of the process, really. Remember, the urgency was created by we know that the centre is opening on the 1st of November, and the request was for us to move as quickly as we can to be able to respond to the centre being opened.
Okay, Alice, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Jeppy. My question is that we haven't funded this in the budget, and we all know we're under extreme budgetary pressure. Where is this money? Where's this $230,000 going to come from? Should we approve this?
So it comes.
Sorry, Harry, you do it.
Yeah, it comes from the Infrastructure Reserve Fund, and there's which is funded by developers, and so and I checked with Katrina, and there's plenty of money in that reserve that is able to fund this, if you should want to do so. So it doesn't have any impact on rates.
Absolutely.
And the second part to that is obviously with the opening on the 1st of November, timeframes are reasonably quick and short. And I take Anne's comments about consultation, but we are talking about connecting an existing footpath to the community. I'm not quite sure why there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. But, we're connecting a footpath to a new footpath to get people there. Whether it's on one side of the road or another is neither here nor there. Are we going to be able to get this done by the 1st of November?
Well, no, we won't get it done by the 1st of November. But this gets us going on a fast track as opposed to a slow track.
Yeah. And the last part, of course, is at reading it, we're talking about connecting the existing footpath that comes past farmlands and ends up at Hospital Road. Then we're connecting that footpath along the side of Arbour Hotel, round to the corner, and then the only really interested party from then on is Kurunui College. So whilst I take Anne's comments that everybody in the community would like to know, actually we're extending an existing footpath to get people to the hospital. I'm not sure whether people will have much relevance about that apart from Kurunui College.
So it's just to clarify, it is a bit more than just a footpath. So there's flush median, road marking, curb and channel, drainage improvements. So it's a good level.
Absolutely. But my point is, do we have time to go out to the community through the community board, which is not going to add anything to the discussion about this? Actually, the people who are most impacted by this is Kurunui College, and maybe we get the sign off from Kurunui and then get on with it, because that footpath along the side of Arbour Hotel has been in discussion for many, many years in Greytown. And this, I can't see any alternative apart from that. So really, going to the community board and all respect to the community board, all it's going to do is delay the final process even longer, which is exactly the opposite of what we want to achieve.
Alex.
Yeah, I still think it's important to go through the community board, and even if it looked like it was, I mean, we are since it's become a responsibility of the council just recently for this, instead of being a part of the developer, we're rushing it pretty quickly, which I think is a very good thing. If it found that a referral to the community board might delay it, then we might ask them for an extraordinary meeting to consider it, that the assets are put in place as quickly as possible, as close as possible to the opening of the centre. So I don't think that's insurmountable, Alistair.
Okay, well, seeing as we've got the chair of the community board here, and could you take that note on board and let's move on with this, because any delay is just going to delay people being able to get to the medical centre.
Yeah. Okay. You're on mute. You're on mute, Anne. Okay.
Could I just raise something, dear GP? Sorry, as chair of the Martinborough Community Board, the South Wairarapa Kurunui College is the college for the South Wairarapa children. And so it's not just a Kuranui College issue. There will be safety concerns and aspects of this that will interest the Kuranui College community, which is much wider and broader and actually encompasses the South Wairarapa district. So sorry, just wanted to raise that they're just
Right.
things around safety, and in this space, which has been raised since I was at college, you know, is going to be something of interest to the community.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Well, we'll take that point, and that can be part of our plan going forward, Harry.
Yep.
We're going to have to be a bit of comms around this. So now we need to quickly move on. So Pam, one last question on this, and then we've got the other Moiki Road and that.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Jeppy. My concern is NZTA are looking at improvements to State Highway 2. Do we need to put them into consideration with regard to the increased traffic on that intersection, especially two things I see is the turning right traffic from coming from Featherston into that intersection, and perhaps those coming south from Greytown Township through and turning left into Bidwell's Cutting Road. There needs to be, my thought is to maybe have a giveaway sign at the end of that intersection on Bidwell's Cutting Road, because when you've got right turning traffic there, that's always an issue for the line of sight as you're coming round on that corner. So just those, yeah, just my thoughts on that at the actual intersection. Thanks.
I guess I'll carry on, Harry.
Pam's absolutely right. Of course, we would talk to NZTA. We have a chicken and egg situation where one of the options was considering a pedestrian crossing across the state highway at that location. But the NZTA comment was, well, we didn't have a form footpath, so what's the point in having a pedestrian crossing? So now that we're making progress along this line, is very timely to have that kind of discussion with NZTA about what the thoughts are with the State Highway 2 safety improvements overall.
Right. Okay. I think we need to move on to the other two proposals before we. I've just lost things here a little bit. Too many screens and not enough fingers. Right, we'll move on to the Bidwell Glenmorvan Road intersection improvements. Is there any discussion around that? I mean, we've all looked at it, and I guess that is going to come down to a final design, isn't it, Harry? Is it?
It's the same. It's the same thing. You know, this is just for information that if we are successful with our funding from Waka Kotahi, these are the two priorities for intersection improvements on Bidwell's Cutting Road. So that they're there for completeness to understand what we're doing. And again, obviously, we want to talk with the residents about the design. Tim, do you have any comment about the hump that Lee mentioned, the sight lines?
Oh, I'm certainly aware of it. There's a couple of humps on that road which we cause concerns, but each plans we're looking at signs, lines, marking, delineation upgrade, not major geometric improvements, and they fall under the Road to Zero proposed budget and well within the road safety action plan. And they do have an impact on safety, and the budgets requested are not excessive. I think for 21-22 year is 12 grand, and it's only a fraction of that for the following 2 years. So they are just minor signage improvements really, and we've deemed intersections as a high risk on those roads. So it's just enhancing what's there already.
Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I understand that there are we're taking advice from roading engineers and also looking at the requirements and statutory requirements on safety on our road. There was criticism about lack of consultation, but these are just brand new drawings with a number of options. But will we be circulating these to the residents of Moike Road and informing them of the options?
And the answer is yes, we would. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit tricky. If we don't get the funding, it's something that won't occur. But I think Tim's point is really important. That this is not a major intersection upgrade. This is simply just improving what we've currently got. So it's just a bit of an improvement, but it's certainly not a full-scale intersection improvement.
Yeah,
that is be a whole different level and order of cost for both of those roads.
We have looked at the possibility of forming right turn bays on Bidwell's Cutting, both into Glenmorven and Moike. That certainly involves land purchase on the opposing side of the road. So, yeah, as Harry said, it's a bigger job than just improving signage and markings.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's these reports of it, as Harry said, have only just come out, and there is time to give it consideration once we find that we're going to get the funding. Is that that's my understanding?
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So Lee, you're still clicked in, but I guess you'll be we're on song there that everyone all along those roads will actually have the opportunity to understand it and probably add to it. So with that in mind, we need to.
Thank you.
Good God, we need to. Someone moved that we've received it, haven't we, Suzanne?
Yes, you've received the report.
Right, and someone like to move to recommend that the options shown on plan CO1 for Bidwell Cutting Road improvements, pedestrian access and safety improvements to Five Rivers Hospital be accepted. Someone like to move that?
Can I just ask a query? Is that subject to council approval, or is that subject to a discussion with the community board of Kuranui School?
Well, again, all we're suggesting here is that you are approving, if you like, the concept diagram. It's a scheme diagram, and then we will refine that as it goes, as it goes through, as we talk to people. But this is just asking you to improve the concept so that we can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Yep. Okay, on that, I'll move in that direction. Alex, you'll second it. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Right. The second recommendation is that a budget of 226,000 of works as identified in Plan CO1 be approved and funded from the Infrastructure Reserve Fund. Would someone like to move that? Ross, thank you. Seconder, we have Alex. All in favour? Aye. Right. We are behind, guys, but we are making progress. Now we have item C2, which is road stopping and sale of Huntley Street.
Sorry, just before we move on, can we make it very clear that that part, it's very topical in Greytown about how people are going to get to the medical centre, and we really need, there's no point in having a fantastic medical centre if people can't get there. So really, we need to actually move on this and get it to the community board as soon as practical, and if necessary, we call the community board together earlier, and the same for consultation with Kuranui, because it's probably the most phone calls I get on any topic in Greytown is about how people are going to get to the medical centre.
Yeah, well, Harry indicated that earlier on that we are going to move on this pretty soon. This is the start of it, and apply, and brought the point up that we need to consult. And I guess you're right, we need to do it quick. So Harry,
go as fast as level 3 allows.
Yeah, and Alistair, if I could also comment through you, Mr. Chair, that I'm actually pretty impressed with the speed at which these drawings have been made and the proposal. I certainly know that developers are very keen for something to happen, but it's only come to council officers' attention on the haste of this very recently. So well done, guys.
Yeah, no, I'd second that. Well done, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Very good. Okay, right. We're moving on to where the hell I can find it. It's road C2 road stopping, the sale of Humphrey Street, Greytown. Would someone like to move that we receive that report? I'll move in that direction. Seconder, Alex. Okay, right. Karen, I guess this is where you shine.
Thank you, Councillor. Just in the interest of time, I'm not suggesting that I go through the report. I'm just here to answer any questions and perhaps respond to Daphne's queries that she raised in public forum. The couple that I picked up remind me if there are others. So this is really just a notification report on a proposed road stopping and sale for just area of a road outside 23 Humphrey Street. Just responding to Daphne's concerns that she raised around valuation. In the report, yes, I have noted that the valuation will be carried out for market price, and that will be on the basis of the benefit accrued. So effectively what will happen is that the property will be valued as is, and then a revaluation based on the extended pieces of land being incorporated into the title. And what that does is it picks up those particular areas where subdivision may not have been possible beforehand, but with the extra piece of land, then subdivision is possible, which of course increases the value. Perhaps the Mayor would like to jump in if there was any comments around the valuation aspects there, but that's our proposal to go forward on that. Daphne's point about the foot, I presume she was referring to a potential for a footpath, pedestrian access in front of the property. There is no footpath there at the moment. The property to the east side has got a water race, and so that would be an issue, and that's out front of the property. And to the west, we would be looking to align the new area with the property on the west side. And so the area for footpath is quite minimal there. There are footpaths across the other side of the road, but not directly across the other side of the road. So there wouldn't be any connectivity, and perhaps Tim can expand on that if you've got any further questions around footpath area. But we have assessed the application, and we're just waiting on COVID restrictions to go down, and then the survey can be complete, and then that will be lodged with LINS, and then public notification after that, and we'll come back to the committee with the any outcome from that, and with a recommendation to move to council. Any further questions?
Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Jeppy. Karen, look, I note in your report that Finance, Audit and Risk have raised this previously about having a policy on this. It seems that we're doing all these things very haphazardly, and there doesn't seem to be a logical way in which we're doing this. And when I look at the map, there's another property to the east which you identified. Again, are we going to come back and do exactly the same thing again in the future and have to write a whole another report? And then you go down to the other streets. So Greytown, and I presume the other towns, are littered with this. Surely we should actually do it once and do it right.
Thank you, Councillor Plimmer. The property to the east have been approached to see whether there is any intention that they would also like to do the same, and they have indicated that they would not want to at the time, so there is no efficiencies there. The policy, what we're developing at the moment are procedures and clear procedures and policies in order to progress applications. Every single application has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, because of course they're all different. So whilst we can have a broad policy, for example, I know that the issue was that there's quite a lot of sort of misalignment and unalignment, and it would be good to be able to have a position on aligning those. I think it's quite difficult to get any further than that, because there will be people who do not want to align, and then what do we do with those people? Do we want to actually, give a license to occupy, and if they didn't want to pay for a license to occupy? There's a lot of considerations, but we will be thinking about those as we continue developing the policy. But ultimately it comes back down to a case-by-case analysis.
Right. I think that it is explained in recommendation 4, Alistair. that they are working on a policy. Yep, see that? No, you.
Sorry. Yeah, look, it just seems really, I think this is the third one under this triennium in Greytown. I think it was the third one that we've done, and yet it just seems to be taking a lot of council time, a lot of effort to come up with something that is really quite simple, to draw a line and say, this is where the boundary would be. And I'm not saying that everybody has to buy it, but do we have to reinvent the wheel every time when we know that all we're going to try and do is actually align our property and allow the people then the option to buy? Do it once, do it right.
Yeah, Alistair. Alex, man.
Yeah, thanks. Alistair, this has been raised at FAR and or Planning Regulatory as well. And that's the whole point of developing a road encroachment and sale policy, is to stop us from having to look at every individual sale at a council level. So that and Greytown is littered with bits of land like this. So so at the moment our policy is this is the way we have to do it, but we're trying to avoid that, as per your comment.
Right, we need to move on, guys. I think we've pretty well discussed most things here. And would someone like to move recommendation 2, 3, and 4 on one? I don't think we need to have them separately. You're in favour of that, guys? We've got a mover, Alex, and I'll second it. So they're as read on the agenda, and all in favour of that? Right, carried. Righto, we're moving on to D1, the Hinakura Road update. Now that's someone like to move that we receive the report. Where the hell can I find it? Ross, and a seconder, Alistair. Okay, here we go. Harry and Tim.
Thank you. First of all, just like to make a slight correction to the report itself. In the background, which explains the context here, we mentioned that June 2021, the weather event became unstable and was closed, and it's since been reopened to light traffic. That should also read and heavy traffic.
Yeah.
So just in case anyone spotted that, just to clarify that. Okay, so look, hot off the press, we have 2 reports, and David will be here to speak to the remediation plan. So this is great work that GWRC are doing with us. Obviously, it is our project, and we really appreciate their support and their funding contribution. You'll note in the report that they're contributing 50% of the funding towards the stabilisation work that's been identified. So I just first of all want to acknowledge the great work that GWRC are doing here and working with us. And David will speak to that in a few minutes at the plan. The second part is the actual geotech assessment. This is complex. It is, if it was an easy fix, we would have fixed it by now. It is a slump. It is not, so the whole hillside is moving. It's not a slip. So it's not just a matter of clearing fritter and soil and just getting on with life. The whole hillside is moving. I've also asked, it's not in the report, but there were questions raised around what are the alternative options should this prove to be something we just cannot fix or keep stable. It is a management issue. It's not we can't build our way out of the slump. And so I've asked him to just speak briefly about what we are thinking about in terms of alternatives. He's thought about 2 or 3, and 1 or 2 he's rejected, and what the next steps in that will be. So that's the introduction. I'll just hand over to David. David, are you there?
Yeah, yes. Welcome, David.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffy. Pleasure to be here this morning. Thanks for inviting me to speak to the report that Harry's just mentioned. Thank you for the summary, Harry. I think you've covered the background pretty well. just emphasizing that this is a long-term management issue, that earth flow landslide movement that we describe that type of erosion as will be here for the rest of our lives and then some. So the problem's certainly not going away. That said, it is something that we have developed techniques to manage quite successfully. So it's not the end of the world by any means in terms of the road being there and living with the ongoing management issues that we'll have to take care of. So my team has put together this report recommending long-term solution management for the problem. And that consists of a few parts which all need to be done together. It's important to note that we can't pick and choose which bits of the recommendations to implement, because it really is sort of a package that we're recommending is required to manage the whole situation. So I'll just quickly run through those parts of the recommendations. So first of all, there's a dam located just uphill from the road, which is contributing to part of the problem, but it's important to know that small dam and the reservoir of water that the dam is holding is certainly not the extent of the problem. It's a very small portion of the water seeping into the hillside and land erosion that's causing problems for the road. So the first part of the recommendation involves finding an alternative site for that reservoir, which is serving as a water supply for both the farm operations and domestic water use for the landowner. That's really important. We've got to get the alternative water supply sorted before the landowner is likely to agree to any work going ahead. So we've put some work into identifying options for alternative water storage, and we've come up with a couple options that aren't final yet, but I think either one will work depending on the final decision of where the landowner wants the new dam to be. Second is quite simply just managing the runoff on the hillside. So this has been designed with what we call V-drains. It's not rocket science, it's just cutting trenches in well thought out, well planned areas on the hillside to capture the water so it doesn't saturate and lubricate the earth flow that's wanting to move downhill. These earth flows I'm talking about are very common in the hill country. They're like glacier movement of soil earth material. They're always on the go, but imperceivable, and every once in a while they let loose in a rain event. So the drainage is a series of machine dug trenches that capture the runoff and then direct the runoff into controlled discharge points, which we refer to as box drains. So these channels will capture the runoff, direct it to a certain point. It's captured in a sump style box, which then controls the runoff into a discharge point through a small pipe. So that's just managing the water off the hillside. And third is the third part of the recommendations is vegetation control, and that consists both of removing trees that are past their use by date. There's quite a few very old mature trees that are probably doing a little bit to hold the hillside together, but they're very, very large canopies at risk of falling over. And when those types of trees go, they actually do a lot more harm than good. So we need to control a lot of the trees that are past their use by date. And the second part of the vegetation planning is quite a lot of new planting. And that consists of a mix of willow and poplar planting in the troublesome erosion areas, and then more of the large scale earth flow type erosion areas. We're talking about a woodlot of some sort. Sorry, not a harvested woodlot, a permanent exotic planting, probably eucalyptus, possibly radiata, but I think radiata is probably down on the options of preferred species. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to take questions. Oh, sorry, Harry did mention that Greater Wellington has offered to pay half the bill, and that's easy enough. We have a number of programs that support erosion control, and this will qualify for erosion-prone land, which is will safely meet our criteria for subsidizing erosion control treatment. So we're quite happy to pay 50% of the cost. And lastly, before I hand over questions, the final approval for works to occur on private land, I'd like to leave that in South Wairarapa's hands, as this really is a South Wairarapa project. I understand the landowners on board, and the communications that my staff have had with the landowners, they are agreeable to this all going ahead. So the two questions are who's going to pay the other half, and just final permission to get on the private land and undertake this work. So happy to leave it there and respond to any questions.
Harry, could I just ask you for a start, just to explain how we're going to fund our side of it, because there are people that are concerned.
So we have that in existing budgets. So our 30,000 is confirmed. So it's in existing budgets to do that. And yes, we would definitely take responsibility of working with the landowner. I mean, it's not just this drainage itself, it's things like stock exclusion and those types of things for large vegetation to work. So it's a cooperative effort between two of us, but recognising we have to be the lead in this.
Yep. And just one other thing, I know that Donnie's still here, and he mentioned and when he spoke before, and David, I'm just wondering whether we could have regular sort of meetings at stages out there with the concerned residents. I mean, if they see what's going on and get a better understanding of it, I think they'll accept it a lot more. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all. I can't really commit to having staff out there for community meetings. I think we'll quite happily involve ourselves with any recommendations, even the implementation of work. But I'm a little bit reluctant to give the community the impression that this is in GW's hands to manage. No. So I mean, I'm quite happy to support South Wairarapa as best we can, but I think the fronting up to any sort of community meetings on the ground, and that really is a matter for South Wairarapa officers to support. And if there is a situation where GW definitely needs to be there, then of course we can. But I don't think it's necessary for us to go side by side with South Wairarapa every step of the way.
And I'd certainly agree with that, David.
Yep. Alex, you had a view?
Yeah, thank you, David, for this. It's fascinating, especially seeing that headscarp and the amount of movement there, which is contributing or shows you the actual movement of the entire 500 metres of land. A couple of comments. One would be certainly, if possible, we could distribute this through Shield to all the Hinakura residents, this report. I think it's very complete and actually gives you a very good picture of what can be done and the fact that it's not the end of the world. And B, I suppose, is timing is if we agree with this and get it going, can this work be started immediately?
Yeah, the timing immediately, probably not, in all honesty. I mean, we can do a minimal amount to try to control the water as it passes the roadside. And I think my understanding is South Wairarapa has already done a lot of that drainage improvement just to get water across the roadway. The sequence of activities that I went through in terms of those three parts of the recommendation package are in sequence, and those are seasonally dependent. So we need to deal with the alternative water source for the landowner. That's critically important. I think if we don't sort that one out, they simply won't agree to us carrying on with the rest of the package. That requires the ground to be a bit more dry before we rip into that. So that's definitely a spring, summertime activity. Cutting the drains, installing the V drains and the box drains that I referred to is definitely a summertime activity. And then if we get that stuff squared away in the summer months, then we could no doubt implement the tree removal would be a fine weather activity as well. And tree planting is the last step of the sequence. So tree planting this winter is out of the question. One, we don't have the tree stock, we don't have the labor force to get the trees in the ground, and it's the last in terms of the work package that needs to be done. So everything that leading up to the planting can be done in summer months, apart from the immediate sort of drainage improvements across the road. So really we're looking at a 10 to 12 month period to get the whole package done.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you, David. Harry, if we could just make sure that we possibly do a timeline for the residents as well, to give them surety that on how things are going and timings of these actions as per David.
Yeah, within the limitation that David's announced. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that, David. Donnie, I know you're online. I guess you understood that as well as we all did. If we Harry, just through Shields, have a regular update, I think most people will be happy with that. Alex, you did intend to have a meeting with the Hinakura residents. Were you proposing we have that sooner than later?
Well, I certainly would like to, whether that now goes through Zoom or the speed at which we'll go into level level 2, where a community meeting in Hinakura might be achievable. But certainly, I think we now have all the information and plan going forward that would make a meeting more productive. So I'm very, always have been amenable to getting that underway.
Okay, we'll do a little bit of work on that. Maybe we'll get Shields involved. Tim, have you got any comment on this?
So, JP, just remember there's 2 reports. There's also the Geotech report. So we've had, and you'll see the 2 are linked, the remediation plan and the Geotech report. Tim, anything that you want to add from the Geotech report?
Firstly, I'll touch on David's report. If you don't know, we've worked successfully with David and his team in other parts of the district, mainly out on White Rock. The method he's proposing here has worked extremely well on a large slip at Riverside, and also him and his team had large input into the Usher Hill management. And attending public meetings out there, the locals are extremely happy with the final outcomes of what they've achieved. So that gives everybody a bit of confidence around what we're proposing here. And as David did mention, it's not an overnight fix. It is processed. And certainly the V drains forming above the road will have to be controlled and managed under the road and down to the base of the gully, which we would take care of. That just means probably upsizing culverts and managing their outlet discharges. So that's on David's report. Geotech report. Yeah, we're talking the use of technology here to have a great overview of the whole slip plane. And bear in mind, the observations they are noting here are observations at a certain point of time, what they see through their investigations and what they see on the ground.
Tim, would you like to comment on, I mentioned earlier about the alternative options and what we're thinking in that area?
If the worst case scenario does come, the alternative option would be look at relocating the road to above the current slip plane. And the quickest way to assess that would be with drones these days, who can produce plans, contour plans to a pretty fine detail. Going below the road isn't an option because you're working into the toe of the slip, which you don't want to disturb anymore. And the gullies there are quite steep. There is no if a road or any other trail through there as there are most other parts of the district. So to go over the road, you have to look at above the road. If that is an option, looking at talking to the landowners and just seeing whether we can have access on a temporary nature until the current road corridor is stabilised.
Does anyone have any
Okay.
questions?
Alistair, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Jeppy. Tim and Harry, I've just look, David, thank you for that report. Very, very comprehensive. It strikes me reading it though that we're in the same situation, I suppose, a little bit like the Manawatu Gorge, that no matter what we do, this is going to keep slipping. And option B, it just seems to make sense that we look at option B. Well, do the work that's proposed here, obviously, because option B is a longer term solution. But are you proposing, Harry, that we look at option B now to work out what option B may well eventuate, because we could be looking at this road slipping every year?
The answer is yes. I mean, that's exactly the next step will be to do a drone flyover. Drone technology is amazing now. You can actually do topographical layers to get a sense of heights and all those types of things. So it's not just a series of photographs. So it gives us a sense of the terrain, our contour, all those types of things. So that would be the next step. Yeah, we're not going to wait.
Good.
If I might, I'll just, excuse me, Councillor Jepson, if I might, I'll just say a couple more things. I wouldn't compare this to Manawatu Gorge at all. That slip in the gorge there was a catastrophic sort of mass movement hard rock event. And this is much more of a slow earth flow type issue, which is far easier to manage than a catastrophic event where thousands and thousands of cubic meters of greywacke give way all at once. So yeah, I think the option that we're talking about with drainage control and vegetation management over time can be quite successful. And just yeah, it's always worthwhile to consider your options, but I think the alternatives for just managing this issue will be incredibly expensive. Any sort of shifting the road to alternative or sort of structural solutions beyond bioengineering with vegetation it'll get up into the millions, I would guess.
Yeah, that nails it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, look, we can do this for another 2 hours and still not achieving anything greater than what we've got. We've got a way forward. We've got the geotechnical report, and as Tim said, we are pursuing options if everything else fails. So, because we are running late and we have other guests here waiting, I'm just going to suggest that we do recommendation 2 to 4 all at one. Does someone like to move that? Thank you, Alex and Alistair. We're all in favour of that. Good. Right. We need to now move on.
Excuse me, Jeppy. Just while we're on that report, can we have a look at page 2 of the officer's report, and it's under 2.1 immediate works. We're talking there, I think this needs a small correction. So we've got GWRC's council officers will continue to work with GRC and WSP. I think that's meant to be SWDC in there.
That's correct. Sorry, well spotted, Pam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, righto. Thank you very much, David. And Donnie, I hope you got something out of that. But it looks like we have got a way forward. Time will tell whether it's the right way, but thank you. And Tim and your crew, thanks very much. David.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, just saying my pleasure, and I'll sign out here. I'm happy to carry on this conversation with officers as required. So thanks, and have a nice level 3 afternoon.
Yep, very good. Okay, thanks, David. Right, we now moving on to D2, 3 waters, and boy, there's some reading in there. So I'm going to ask if someone would like to move. We received this report, Garrick and Alistair. Right, Harry.
Okay, look, I'll try and keep this brief, but it is quite challenging because there's a lot of information. Just before I start, just want to let you know that our website has we've now got a special page that literally went live today. So there's information in the public arena. So one of the key elements of this paper is really a summary of what the government's proposing and what the current thinking is, the state of the play as it is now. What we haven't been able to do is to do the analysis of what it actually means for us, other than the high level work that the initial WICS assessment did in terms of impact on household costs. So there's a long journey to go. What government has asked us to do is take 8 weeks. We're already through that, essentially, which is to start to get drilled down into specific questions that we have at the Department of Internal Affairs. And so this is a summary of where things are up to. The next step is a workshop with councillors to really get a sense of what are the questions that we need to be asking of the Department of Internal Affairs about our own local situation. And Katrina will be doing some work on some of the financial impacts, but I'm sure there's a much wider range of questions around governance, around local control, around what's the impact of rural communities, et cetera, there'll be no end of questions that we'll do. Daphne asked whether we could do that in public. I think that's something we can talk offline about, but certainly the intention was, regardless, in the questions that we put into the Department of Internal Affairs, we would be putting to the full council as a paper. So the public has very good visibility about the kind of questions and issues the council is gathering more information about. Okay, so just starting from the top, and just a reminder, this is not just about new entities and efficient supply of water. It's a total reform of the water system in New Zealand. So there's a number of elements to that. So there's regulation. So there's new drinking water standards that will be applied. Equally, the new regulator will be working on wastewater standards and ultimately stormwater standards. So we're starting at one place, but certainly the level of regulation that's going to be impact on the water entities or whatever form or shape water is supplied is going to increase beyond even what's currently in the current context. So there's regulation there. There's environmental regulation that's sitting alongside this, which is around the quality of water and fresh water in New Zealand. But there's also economic regulation. So economic regulation is really the voice of the consumer to make sure the price and the way that the entities, because of the scale or whatever is done, is actually overseen by an independent part of it. So it's a tripartite system. But the main purpose of the paper is around talking about surface delivery reform. So it's supply in this paper itself. I just want to give that context. So look, so the problem facing New Zealand is covered in the paper. Essentially, the government is concerned that the costs to New Zealanders, to ratepayers, to people who require water is going to increase anywhere between 120 to 185 billion over the next 30 years. And there's a real question about the affordability of that for households. It's also concerned and has been quite concerned about the state of assets and some of the failures that have occurred around the delivery of water. When we ourselves recall all too sadly the E. coli outbreaks in our own systems. And there's also just resilience, so the issue around natural hazards, climate change, and how that's going to impact on our Three Waters network. And lastly, not the least, is also around supporting growth. We ourselves, you'll be very well aware, and it's certainly one of the challenges we had to look at in terms of our expenditure priorities this year, is the state of our water supply assets, our water supplies, our asset condition, and not just what we're facing today, but into the future with major plants, wastewater plants, because that's actually where the cost is. And water supply is one thing, but the the wastewater is really the big challenge for New Zealand. So the government's agreed on a high-level design, which is 4 new water services entities, and we are in Entity C. It's currently said that they will be responsible for drinking water, wastewater, stormwater. Water races, they are saying, will stay with councils, but the option is to contract back to the entities to do those. And so the reform model really looks at taking the control of the asset and basically applying an economy of scale. The whole model is predicated on an infrastructure being delivered on an economy of scale that allows for a balance sheet management to make prudent investment over time. And that to make that model work, it requires the transfer of ownership and debt. The government is very clear that the assets remain in public ownership and is doing its best to try and buttress that as much as they can. But of course, the spectre of privatisation is always there because Parliament is sovereign and can change laws at its own volition. And one of the key things is this balance sheet separation to enable borrowing, which arises from the economy of scale. And a critical thing for councils is they have no shareholding interest and no financial recognition as such. And that's probably the predominant concern. The governance model looks at having essentially an independent board, so a professional board with professional skills, competency-based, but having basically an advisory group that links councils and iwi together to provide advice to the entity. So it's not dissimilar to the Wellington water model where there's a board, but there is a water committee that advises, but it's much, the real strengthening is in the iwi connection to it. And the iwi connection is equally, I think, part of the strategy to buttress the risk of privatisation. I mean, there's a lot of information in here. Probably the thing, the dollar thing, we've got to take all this with caution. There's in the middle is some of the modelled impact to ratepayers under the different entities. I mean, that is really just an indicator. It's not exhaustive. It's not based on it's based on as near accurate information as was available at the time. But I stress that information was provided in previous LTPs and doesn't take into account substantial investment that New Zealand has made by all local councils in this particular LTP. We're one of many who've really upped the game in terms of investment. But the other critical thing that the model doesn't take into account is growth. So it's just based on present numbers, and it doesn't take into account any changes in quality standards that would occur. So what does it mean for us? The boundaries are based on scale, water catchments, communities and workforce. There is still a bit of boundary adjustment to go through and across some of them. We would have potentially 22 plus councils in the entity. Manawhina will have a joint oversight role. And councils and iwi Māori, of those 22 council entities and the numerous iwi Māori entities, would have to decide on how to basically get down to a 10-level representative group, which is going to be no mean challenge given the range of councils, the range of iwi interests, and basically does require people agreeing that someone else will represent them and their community. So there's probably as many questions that we have as there are answers. Just for completeness, the government has optioned a package for local government. They have put funding in and basically, so what they call a better off fund, which is a chunk of money the council can use at its own blush essentially for supporting communities to transition to sustainable and low emission economies, or for infrastructure on services enable growth, etc. So they have put some money on the table as an offset to some of the issues that this faces, but equally they've also announced a no worse off package. So the commitment is from central government very clearly. They do not expect councils to be worse off in the situation, though there's a hell of a lot of work to do, a heck of a lot of work to do to try and work out what that actually means. So where we're up to, this is going to take a number of years. Where we're up to today is we're in the middle of that 8-week process that I mentioned, which is essentially to give councils a breathing space, because there's been so much information coming at them, to get around the information that is in the public arena, and more importantly, to try and drill down to this kind of questions that we have locally, and try and get answers from DIA. In essence, that takes us to the 1st of October, when there's an expectation that we would be engaging or communicating with our communities about what these options and opportunities are, the pros, the cons, the fish hooks, so we can gather community feedback, which alternatively leads us to having to make a decision about whether we would opt into this reform or opt out. So the government's taken a pause on decisions at this point, and is just in a process of collecting 67 different views of questions and doing their best to try and reply to those. So we're heading to the workshop where we'll get a real chance to drill down into this. Dougal List will be facilitating with that. Dougal is working across all the councils, so he's got a good position to have heard what a number of other councils have raised in terms of the questions for DIA. So I've asked him to share that with us at our workshop. And the other key that we will be doing is having a look. Trina will be drilling down into our balance sheet, our debt. What does this actually mean for us in terms of financial implications? So the key kind of issues are being raised, and I mentioned in the report: governance and representation. How do we keep local voice? What are the protections from privatisation? How do we ensure that small communities are prioritised in investment? There's always the worry that the bigger and louder voice will be served first. The other one is really getting a good understanding of what the financial impacts and asset transfer are for us. Then there's the wider context of what does this mean in terms of local government, and the wider sector reforms, the RMA and the future of local government. And also, what's the transition for our workforce and the capability to actually run a system of that scale. So look, that's a whistle stop across the paper. So I'm just happy to answer any questions.
Right, thanks, Harry. Look, at this workshop we're having next week, is the Community Board and the Mara Standing Committee, they're invited to it?
I hope so. I'll check that. Definitely the Mara, yeah, we'd want the chairs and the Mara Standing Committee to be involved, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, look, we've all got a multitude of questions to ask around this, and unfortunately we haven't got the time, but this is the start of the process, I see, and I think it's imperative that we all make the effort to get to this workshop, because that's when we can drill into some of the detail, as you say, Harry. I'm just a little bit concerned that the timeline isn't going to give us enough time to get a consensus from our ratepayers. What's your feeling on that?
Well, remember that it's a two-step process. What the DIA want us to do is take until the 1st of October to get the answers to the questions that we have before we, so that when we go out to our ratepayers and our public, that we have the information to be able to have meaningful engagement with them. So that's the first step. So we've got till the 1st of October to do that, and then the next step is engaging with our communities with the information.
Okay, right, Alex.
Yeah, just a quickie, Brian. I think I've made my views very clearly known on the way that the government has implemented this and pushed this on us, and the speed, and also, but I'd like to comment, it's very difficult for us to engage with the public when probably 50% of the detail on what this is going to look like from them is still yet to be itemized by the DIA. We can't consult on half a proposal. So just to let you put that to bed, that we're not trying to drag the chain or anything. There's still a lot more information coming out. But I just looked at my calendar and I have 7 meetings regarding Three Waters over the next 2 weeks. So it's certainly heating up with regards to a final lot of information.
So you're going to be the go-to man if we got questions then.
It will certainly also forward questions to me that I can also raise if I haven't thought of them. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, because as I said before, a lot of us have got questions and concerns, and maybe we are better to email you and you may be able to give us an answer or take them forward.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I am trying to take Garrick along as deputy to as many of those meetings as possible. And also it is being raised within Wellington Water Committee as well. So, yeah.
Good. Well, actually on my screen, Garrick is sitting above you and he's got his hand out. So Garrick.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll be very brief. Can I just say, Harry, you covered off well. Can I just refer people to the documents that Harry sent out from the steering committee? There's 4 documents there that are well worth looking at, and it covers off the rural side and certainly the governance side. Can I also support Alex that if we can get some questions in before next Friday, it'll give us a chance to go through some of these things and come back with some reasoned answers. I'm following the rural media and they're talking to us quite a bit about where they're going, the concern about rural water and the concern once again about the access to the water. So if we can have some questions before Friday, and please team, have a look at the docs that Harry sent out. They are very, very good and very.
Thanks, Garrick. Welcome, Rebecca. Now, you and I had a wee discussion about this morning. Are you quite happy to be able to forward those questions to Alex and Garrick and
me, please?
Oh, yeah, and Harry, yeah. So,
morning, everybody. Sorry for my late attendance, and I'll probably need to leave early as well. Yes, I'm more than happy to do that. That's just fine by me. I think echoing what Garrick has said is really, really important. This is a space which we need to be highly engaged in at the moment, and a space that we really need to have our heads around. So there's a lot of change and there's a lot of information that is missing. Some good information there too, I might add, but really important again to put those questions forward. So yeah, I'll send them in, no problem there.
Thank you. Righto, Alice, one quick one, and we must
one very quick one, Harry, and Garrick just touched on it. The rural water reforms that seem to have sort of just sprung out of nowhere, are they been attached to Three Waters, or are they separate? So
no, they are definitely part of the Three Waters debate. So I sent you out 4 papers. One was around rural water supply. So effectively, the government's starting position is this is not just around public supply of water. It's where people have a private scheme that supplies water, and the policy is essentially saying they should meet reasonable standards for drinking water safety. And so they have legislated in the Water Services Bill that will occur. So depending on, it basically means whoever becomes responsible for public supply, whether it's the entity or whether it's council still continue to do its business, it means that there will be an onus on council to step in if things go wrong in terms of people's ability to be able to meet safe drinking water in terms of private supply. Of course, that excludes basically home self-supply.
Well, right. Gareth.
Can I just, sorry, well, I'm caught up in that because I've got more than 3 properties, so automatically I'm involved in public supply if you have more than 3. I mean, it's very messy. Let's not get into it, but it's very messy.
Oh, believe me, it really is. But as I said, what it means is so the regulatory settings have been written and they've been passed into law, but it will be whatever the public entity is that will be responsible as the backstop if there's a failure in the system.
Thank you. Right.
Sorry, what do you mean by that, Harry? What do you just
when I
expand on
say
a little bit?
whatever the entity is, so if it's the government reforms go ahead and it's entity C, then they are the ones that pick up that responsibility under the regulation. If the council decides to opt out and discontinue doing what it's doing, then this council remains responsible. So it's the public entity that carries the can.
So you're saying that the public entity will go onto farmers' properties and sort out their water supplies, or what? How does that practically look? I suppose for one.
Read the paper.
I have read the paper, and I'm still asking the questions.
Yeah, I don't know what the enforcement powers are, but you can't enter a property without powers of inspection and various things. So, I just don't know the detail of literally the mechanics of how that's going to work at this stage, Alistair.
Yeah, I think also, though, Alistair raises a good point, and Garrick also mentioned it, that with the water regulator, that if anyone is doing private supply on rural and they decide that they don't want to bother with it, the water entity or council must forcibly take over the costs and responsibilities of running that water supply. So it's a huge risk to council under this legislation.
Yeah. Okay. We need to move on. Harry, you've done a great job on this, and I guess if we start reading it for the 4th and 5th time, we might understand it a bit more. But please do, if you've got any questions or queries, get them through to Harry, Alex, or Garrick, and try and attend this workshop, because I think you'll have a better understanding. We'll have more time to discuss some of the finer points. So,
could I just make a comment that one of the reasons we have subcommittees is to be able to nut down into all the detail and so on and so forth, to allow the full council to do their business a little bit more effectively. I'm not interested in being constrained by officers saying you've got 2 hours to do your work. If it's going to take us 4 hours to do our work here, then surely that's what it is. So maybe having one committee meeting following straight after the other imposes artificial constraints on us to actually delve into these issues that we may want to do a hell of a lot more of.
Yeah, you're right, but I think this is a bigger issue than just a assets and services issue. This needs to involve every councillor, and as I said, the community board and the Maori Standing Committee. Look, I'm not going to make a call on this just through the assets and services. We've got to have everyone understanding it, and we've got to have support from our ratepayers, and they need to understand it too. So it's important that we get to these meetings and understand it all, dig into the detail, and then we can convey the same message to our ratepayers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's my point, is that if we're putting an artificial constraint on time for our committees to do this work, then we're not going to be able to report back to the full council on what we've delved into and what we've nutted as the issues. And that's exactly why we have committees. Otherwise, why do we bother having them?
Yeah. Righto, we need to move this on. Would someone like to move that we recommend recommendation 2 confirms continued engagement with DIA so that the full council can make a more informed decision on Three Waters reform at a future date? Rebecca, thank you, and Ross. Righto, guys. Now we've got a couple of guests sitting there listening to all this dribble. Adam and Jeremy, welcome.
Jeppy,
yes,
Jeppy, you go on. It's possible we've got another hour of discussion on the agenda. Can I just ask the committee secretary to make arrangements to delay or defer the following meeting, the planning and regulatory meeting scheduled to start in 14 minutes?
Oh, is that 14
Yep.
minutes?
You're the chair, Councillor Vickery, so with your approval, we can delay that to start for 1 to 1:30 or 2 o'clock, whatever you would like to do.
I think taking Alistair's concerns on board, which I fully endorse, I'd like to defer it to 2 o'clock, thanks.
Okay, we'll let the councillors concerned know via an email or a call.
Righto, all sorted. Okay, guys. Would someone like to move that we receive the P&O report, and we will then I'll ask you to ask these gentlemen questions. They've been sitting there waiting for a couple of hours, listening to us talk about roads and everything else. But so I'll move it. Would someone like to second the report? Garrett, thank you. Got that, Suzanne? Yep.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay, as I said before, guys, welcome. Is there anything you want to
Jeff, sorry, can I interrupt? I'd just like to introduce Gary O'Meara. Where are you, Gary?
I'm here.
Oh,
yep.
I didn't see you, Gary.
Yep. Councillors, this is Gary. So this is Gary's on secondment to us from Wellington Water for 2 days a week. So he's acting in our interest in terms of making sure that the program of works that we're undertaking with Wellington Water are on track, on budget, all those types of things. And he's been beavering away quite hard at that. So I just want to clarify the roles. So Gary's really your voice or my voice with Wellington Water, and Adam and Jeremy are here from Wellington Water to respond to some of the questions you may have directly of Wellington Water. So you'll see that the partnerships and operations, it's a standard report, but there's some. I asked Gary to walk through the water component of this report, and then Tim to walk through the roading. You'll see there's a lot more substance to the roading component of the report that follows on from the last discussion, assets and services, that said, can you please give us a bit more detail about what's going on in the roading area? And I do apologise, Bryce would be here, but for reasons you will be aware of, he's unavailable to talk to any of the amenities issues. So I won't be in a position to answer some of the Miss Daphne's questions about the pump park. Now, I will be able to reply to that once I've got the information from Bryce. But in terms of her question about who is actually managing it from our end, it is Bryce. So with that, I'm just going to hand over to Gary to take you through the water component of the report. Gary.
Okay, thanks, Harry, and good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here. I take it that the report's read, but I'll quickly go through and just pick out some of the key messages and key points in that. So overall operations and maintenance carried out by Wellington Water has largely met our service levels and our outcomes. There's been a couple of incidents, and there's one mentioned further down in the report. There are, however, significant cost increases that have been forecast by Wellington Water in the operational expenditure, and we're working with Wellington Water to make sure that they manage to meet the available funding envelope that we've got for our operational expenditure. The draft CapEx delivery programs, a lot of those projects are underway already, a couple of carryover from the previous financial year. So on the Wellington Water operational performance itself, this is normally measured through a dashboard or a quarterly dashboard that's presented back to Council, and that'll be available at the end of Q1. But to date, there are no major performance issues that we're aware of. Operational response. I just wanted to quickly highlight the wet weather event we had a couple of weeks ago in Featherston, which resulted in wastewater overflows into several properties on Featherston Street in Featherston. Wellington Water responded to that and put in a lot of hours and a lot of work 24/7 to ensure that the flows could be managed to the best that they could be. but there were overflows into private properties, not actually into dwellings. But the result of that was that a couple of properties, 2 affected properties, were offered and accepted temporary accommodation over the period while we were managing those flows and cleaning up and disinfecting their properties. Those residents and all affected residents were in fact kept informed of progress on what was happening around that by Wellington Water's customer hub. There's ongoing investigations into that incident, and there's potential sources of additional inflow and infiltration into the wastewater system in Featherston, which we're following up with Wellington Water. Leakage across the South Wairarapa, so the ongoing leakage problem we've had across South Wairarapa, mainly in Greytown and Featherston, and Wellington Water's conducted a couple of leak detection surveys throughout both towns, and come up with what you can see on the report: 12 public leaks, 1 private for Featherston, Greytown 18 and 4 private leaks, and they're in the process of arranging the repair on them based on the amount of leakage and the prioritisation. But it continues to be a problem both for Greytown and Featherston. Martinborough, on the other hand, looks to be fairly good in terms of leakage. The CapEx program, we've finally got a draft CapEx program out from Wellington Water for this financial year. Initially, it came through based on risks with a 3 million over expenditure on what the LTP funding was available, but Wellington Water has gone through that and revised the program based on respect to the available LTP funding. We're just about to sign that off with them in terms of the projects. And as I mentioned earlier, the majority of those projects have actually commenced or are in various stages of completion. A couple of the big ones there: Waihini Water Treatment Plant upgrade. You'll be well aware of this project. It's been ongoing for a couple of years. I'd have to say there's been some issues in terms of meeting the timeframes and delivery around that. And recently there's been, from Wellington Water's part, a review of the leadership and the input into delivering those plants to get them out the way. But Waihini is now forecast to, with the treated water reservoir, which is a real additional source, and the completion of the new bore 4, to come on board prior to the summer period, which will be great. Unfortunately, that's impacted on the Memorial Park, Greytown Memorial Park water treatment plant upgrade, which we really need Waihini water treated reservoir to come on board to enable sufficient supply to meet the Greytown community over the period of the shutdown to upgrade that plant. So we're now looking possibly into Q1 of the new financial year before we get that Memorial Park up and running. However, Greytown will be able to meet drinking water standards, New Zealand drinking water standards for water supply being sourced from the new Waihini plant during that period. Papawai wastewater upgrade was put on hold and then picked up again in the late part of the last financial year, and is carrying on into this year. And there's obviously some changes there. There are some cost implications which are currently working through with Wellington Water in terms of that project, due to the difficulties they've experienced in terms of methodology and ground conditions. Greytown Smart Meter Trial, which was part of the stimulus funding, is ready to go in October, so that's all on board. Boar Bush and Tate's Creek water supplies, those supplies are currently being identified by Wellington Water as a risk to public health and public safety, and they're looking to disconnect them at the moment, but there'll be an ongoing report coming out on the suitability of them to maintain it for emergency supplies. And Terenikau pipeline crossing was touched on earlier in the meeting from the previous minutes. As it mentions there are weekly inspections and after rainfall events, and that project for replacement of that is programmed for construction in 23-24, with a contingency plan in place, but receiving final reviews in case we do get an early failure on that pipeline. So that's just a quick flick through the high level messages out of that report. And I'll hand it over back to the chair.
Well, just while we're on the water one, is there any questions from the councillors to Gary on that? I think you explained it pretty well. It's actually very easy reading this. Because at the end of the day, pipes are going to break and things are going to happen. So, Alistair.
Yeah, I asked earlier about the pipe across the Taranaki River. 2023-24 seems a long way away for having exposed pipe in a pretty volatile river. Is that realistic, or should we look at perhaps bringing that funding forward?
Well, I'm advised from Wellington Water that it's been in the same condition it is currently for the last decade. And although a risk, it's considered low at the moment, and there is a contingency plan in place in case we did get an early failure. And I suppose it's also the design, and I've been informed that it's quite a large capital works project in terms of funding to deliver that. So, yeah, that's the advice I've received from Wellington Water.
So if that's got a big capital outlay, can we get a briefing on that perhaps next month for assets and services on what they're proposing?
Yep.
Thank you.
Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. In conjunction with the Tahirenika pipe crossing, a year and a bit ago, we had a washed out pipe coming into Featherston, which cut water supply there. Can we be assured that any even low risk areas of the water supply to Featherston have been checked and assessed?
Yeah, I can't answer that right at this moment, but it's certainly something we can go back to Wellington Water to give us an update on that, where those critical pipelines are. I know there's been a recent condition assessment taken on the high criticality assets in Featherston, and in fact right across South Wairarapa. So that report will be coming out shortly, is my understanding. They've identified some risks, especially around reservoir storage, but I don't have the information on the pipelines at the moment. But we can certainly request Wellington Water to come back with a report on that.
I believe we did table a report at the last meeting, but yeah, there'll be an updated version of that, so we'll see what we can bring next meeting.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy. Ross.
Thank you, Gary. Nice to meet you and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Now, with reference to the Borebush Valley Reservoir, how serious a risk does that pose to Featherston's water supplies?
Well, I'm informed that it's a non-treated supply, and therefore it needs to be, you need to have segregation between that and the potable treated water in the reservoir. So that's the first risk. There's a risk of backflow from either of those supplies into that reservoir. And I suppose the second part of that is what is the benefit of keeping those supplies active? And obviously emergency events come to mind. For example, this Taranaki pipe crossing we're talking about at the moment, if that did come to failure and we did have those two supplies up and running, able to provide treated water, then that would be a huge asset and for resilience to the Featherston community. But I suppose the immediate focus is to disconnect the threat of contaminated water getting into the potable treated water reservoir, and then look at what are the benefits and the value and the costs associated, and bringing either of those supplies or both back up to speed as an emergency supply to provide treated water.
Mm.
Thank you.
Alistair.
Yeah, I've got two questions. First one was about the wastewater overflows in Featherston. And I just want to make the point that we have put quite a lot of money into our long-term plan and budget in this first year to address that. And I think it's really important that it is in the public domain, and that this incident is one of the very things that we're trying to address in our long-term plan in the first year, which was, I think, a couple of $1 million, wasn't it, Harry, that was put aside specifically for stopping surface water getting into our wastewater system. So I just want that to be on the record, that this is one of the things that we're trying to address in our long-term plan with our rates. And the second question I have first question, I suppose, is I'm a little bit concerned to see the public leaking of water going on. And Jeremy, if you remember, you briefed us, well, it'd be 12 months ago now, I suppose, about the 50% of our water that we're treating in Greytown was going into the ground somewhere through leaks. And there was a big project to fix that. What I'm not seeing in this report is what sort of percentage of water we're losing again. And you did assure us that we had made significant inroads, and I'm just a little bit concerned that perhaps we haven't made as big inroads as what you might have suggested we had.
Yeah, as far as the percentages go, I'm not actually. You got a point there. We're actually supplying that. I don't know if I don't think we supplied that this time. My apologies for that. The number of leaks that we are seeing is I guess overall tracking down. There was actually a reasonable size leak. I believe that was fixed in Greytown in the last couple of weeks. That has brought down night flows. So we are tracking the right way. I guess the issue is that we've got an aging network, and the leaks, we fix them and more ones come. So yeah.
I'd say it's probably quite important, because it has a direct impact on the budget as to if we're treating all this water and we're losing it into the ground. It seems a huge expense to treat water just to put it into the ground through a leak. So
yeah, well, I mean, Alistair, a big component of the cost lift that we're seeing in the operations area are addressing those network leaks. So we are fixing more leaks, significantly more leaks than we have, 5 years ago. Well, sorry, that the council have needed to 5 years ago, because there are more leaks happening because of the condition of the actual assets themselves. So, yeah.
Are these pipe failures or join failures, more to, I suppose, for want of a better description?
I don't actually have that detail, but I'd imagine it's a combination of the both. Yeah, I can get those details for you if you like for the next meeting.
That would be quite useful, I suppose, in terms of where we're putting money into. Are we having to replace whole pipe networks, or are we sort of going through repairing joins in the pipes?
Sure, we'll find that out.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, guys. We will now move on to the land transport part of the report, and I guess, Tim, this is where you flick your screen on and talk to us.
So I'll step out now. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.
Great.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yep. Adam, thank you. Right. Tim, so you gone missing?
His name was there. Where is it? He's there.
Yeah, he's there. He's there. Harry, is there anything you want to, while we're waiting for Tim to come back, on this report? I think it's pretty
self-explanatory, really. And it's typical for this type of time of the year: weather events, storm events, failures around the district, which we're getting on top of. And I mean, Tim's tried to give. There was concern we just had a list of numbers, and people just want to get some visibility about where and what we were doing. So we've tried to provide a little bit more information in here. On the specific culverts and the reseal program, those types of things. There's also quite a lengthy explanation of the and this is actually quite important. This is the on the road efficiency group. May seem a little bit removed from us. this arose, and it's probably a warning more than anything else. So we're in a situation where Waka Kotahi, because of a shortage of revenue coming in from fuel excise tax and RUC, as you'll be well aware, have not been able to fund the level of maintenance that most councils have requested. In fairness, they've given us a little bit more than we spent last time, but we're not getting the level of investment. This same situation happened under the national government many years ago, and Stephen Joyce's response at that time was to basically flatline government, all local government expenditure. And so there really became a focus on, can we do things smarter with the same amount of money? And this group, the Road Efficiency Group, actually it used to be, REG, was set up. And it's very similar to the water issue in many ways, because what it identified very early on was the level of asset management that council was doing was disparate. There wasn't a common methodology that was used. The form and function of different types of roads were treated differently, which is why they developed a thing called a one road classification. So basically meant that the level of service for different types of roads with different functions would obviously get different levels of maintenance and renewal sequencing. So this is quite an explanation of sort of some of looking behind the scenes at some of the development that's going on across New Zealand to make sure the councils are aligned. It's a very good example of where councils can actually fix these issues themselves with the support of Waka Kotahi. And I suppose part of my thinking reading this again was thinking, there's some lessons to learn about this in the water reform. Because it is a good example of how councils can work a lot smarter and get better results with limited money, which is the situation we're in right now. The other one is the Road to Zero that Tim's pulled out some information about. And again, you had a presentation from Emma Spate around that, so you're well and truly over it. So look, unless there's any specific questions, look, if there are specific questions about a particular culvert or a particular road, I can't answer it. Tim will have to do that. But any questions on the rating stuff?
Yeah, Tim's on board now, so.
Oh, you there, Tim?
Yeah. Thanks.
Did you hear my spiel? So I'll let you add anything that you'd like to highlight to the
I hate to undermine you, Harry. No, it's all pretty good.
Good answer, Tim.
Just going back onto it, business as usual. And I suppose the current funding is we had our application chopped a bit by Waka Kotahi, haven't finalised it yet. But we've jiggled around the maintenance and operations to try and accommodate that. We left the renewals as requested, because if we can get those right, certainly the renewals will reduce the maintenance and operation costs long term. So still trying to drive through our renewals. As Harry said, the one network framework is quite important. ONRC was just driven by traffic counts on the roads, whereas the one network framework is more place orientated and destination orientated, and that should probably fall into the district plan review as well. It is quite critical on how we utilise our roads for final places and destinations.
Tim, there's a couple of things in here, probably just of note, just to let the councillors know. So remember, we put some funding aside for footpaths and for curb and channeling. You'll see under 5.2, we're doing an audit. It's been carried out to identify where the curb and channel and footpath requirements are, so we can get on with that work. And we're also, as mentioned with the Martinborough Community Board paper earlier, that we're doing audit on our pedestrian crossings. Our pedestrian crossings, particularly in Martinborough, are old. They're not compliant with the current standards for pedestrian crossings, would be fair to say. And so we're doing an audit across the entire district, and we'll take a risk-based approach. And the risk isn't just, we're obviously conscious of who's using the pedestrian crossing. So it's near a school, that will get a higher priority than it is simply access for other reasons. So for instance, if in Martinborough, if you were looking at a priority, it's most likely to be the highest priority with the pedestrian crossing to the school. But just to let you know that that work is underway.
Okay, Tim, there was a concern through a ratepayer through the Martinborough Community Board that we aren't maintaining some of our rural roads to the standard that we were meant to. Have you got any comment on that? Are we up to date with our maintenance on these roads? And
generally, yes, we are, Councillor. So they're a changing beast all the time, and with development and growth, it's not only more sections and lots out there, it's more traffic on the road too.
Yes.
And certainly the unsealed roads, I suppose with the four-wheel drive vehicles these days, far more aggressive to the road surface than the normal station wagons of the past. We plan to introduce RoadRoid, which is a app mechanism which we can put in our vehicles, which measure the roughness of the road, and especially unsealed roads, because we've got no mechanism for that at the moment. And that will give us pretty in-depth history. It's all GPS located, so we can do that sort of before and post grading just to see what the difference is with regard to roughness. And it's like everything, it's where we are at the moment with regard to supply of materials. We've been hit with aggregate supplies as well. We've been hit with timber supplies. We've been hit with any imported supply of materials. Not only there is a delay in getting them, there's an increased cost.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Is any other member have a question? Alistair, I see you met up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeppy. Tim and Harry, thank you very much for your quick response on Settlement Road. I just wanted to raise it for the other committee members. This is an issue that the residents of Settlement Road, which is a paper road out the back of Greytown, and they were unsure about how to get their paper road brought onto the network. So Tim and Harry have provided some guidance, and that's been passed on to them. But also the state of the paper road right now is quite poor, and Tim has agreed to make sure that next time, or as soon as the lockdown comes, that a grader can get there just to make it passable in the short term, whilst they go through this issue of vesting it with council. Is that about right, Tim?
Yeah, that is. It's only 760 odd metres long, but it has had a lot of development up there, subdivision, in the last 4 or 5 years. So there's increased traffic, which increased deterioration, and paper roads are really glorified driveways at the moment for the people. And as soon as they become designated as a operational road, we can put them onto our asset list and maintain them under our normal funding regime.
Which is slightly different to vesting. So so we can find a way of being able to afford to maintain it on the people's behalf without actually having it vested in council as a road. And that's what
I do see though that the development people were supposed to bring the paper road up to a particular standard. Is that August 2003? You said that thing through. Is that still the requirement that they will need to have it at a certain standard before we take over?
There's been a lot more development up there since 2003. There's been a lot there in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think that initial horse is probably bolted long ago. And if it's only just a grading regime, an inspection regime, and a bit of metal onto bring that running surface up to a standard. That's not a massive cost, and if we can do it under the subsidised roading budget, it's one of those things. But in conjunction with that, and certainly having issues with New Zealand Post, these roads, and Lee Carter's been in the same boat, is trying to get them to deliver to down the road a little bit further. It's just they're just blatantly saying no. So it's an issue we'll deal with down the track further too.
Are we going to face the same issues with these paper roads that Lee did in terms of emergency services and so
on? There's certainly a lot of paper roads around the Featherston area, which we don't maintain, but they have got access off them. And you know, I suppose emergency services really it's fire and ambulance we're talking about here. They have got access to them, but it's not as smooth as the maintained roads. It's like going up any farm to any homestead up their driveway. Maintained to the same standard. And
thanks.
Ross, you have a question. You're on mute, mate. You're still muted. Ah, better. You got back to mute. I take it that he can't get audio, so well, thanks for that, Tim. One question I have been asked regularly, and I think I know the answer, is the eco reefs out here. My understanding is that Fulton Hogan have got it on the list. They've been put back with the wet weather, and also this COVID issue hasn't helped them. So I presume they'll be onto it this summer, is it?
yeah, we received a notification this week from the Historic Places Trust, giving us the okay, subject to another 15 days. So, yeah, I'll pass that on to Fred, so let him know we're into it.
Yeah.
And I suppose you're looking at that. It's the same sort of gear and equipment that's tied up with Hinakura Road as well. So it's a matter of prioritising.
Yeah.
And I suppose we're coming into spring, aren't we, with the high spring tides? So we can certainly get the ball rolling with regard to that, and the actual implementation will be subject to the tides.
Yeah, that's good. Righto, Harry, in the absence of Bryce, I guess you're going to be the Bryce, are you, and talk about the emissions?
I know, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, you're probably better to email me so I can reply to them. I just don't have that, unless there's something very obvious that people want to ask about in the report.
Yeah, that's great. Pam, have you anything on the waste minimisation that you want to add at this stage?
No, nothing from me. It's pretty quiet. We're looking at where we go within the waste bylaw, and what the committee want to pick up to expand on and look at. So we're just in the process of working that out at the moment.
Well, that's good. Okay, any other questions from the committee? No, right, thank you. We shall move. Do you want to take 5 minutes, or do you want to go on to the action items?
That's the last agenda item, isn't it?
Yeah, let's keep going.
Right. Okay. Righto, someone like to move that we receive the Assets and Services Action Item Report. Alistair and Ross, thank you. Have you got that, Suzanne?
All good, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Right. Now, I'll find it. Have anyone at this, here we are, right. Anyone, any questions, queries, or wanting to more knowledge or more information? We've still got a lot of open items, haven't we?
Some of these, remember, are waiting for a policy review, or they're quite long term. It's just the way that we capture them. Yeah, we try and close them as soon as we can. Look, unfortunately, obviously, I've been acting Ewan, so I've spent most of my energy actually trying to get these reports onto the table for you, and I haven't had a chance to go through all these in detail. But if there's anyone who's got any question, I'll do my best to answer them.
Well, given what we've had on in the last 6 weeks, Harry, I don't expect you to be waving a magic wand and creating little miracles, but I guess, as you just said, if anyone has any queries on these, it might pay just drop Harry a email and you can reply the best you can.
Actually, there's a few here we could close, actually, but I'll do that for the next meeting when I go through them.
Okay. Yeah. Garrett, did you want to say something? Or? Okay, he's all good. Right, we're going around. There's not many on the screen now. Ross, we'll try you, but you happy with how things are?
Yeah, I finally worked out how to unmute myself without it disabling me. Just what I was going to say before, it's probably trite, but the P&O report showed just how much we were in danger of losing essential services in our infrastructure, the three waters and the road in, which constitute about 60% of our annual budget. There's so much in need of urgent repair or replacement. And on this basis, we voted for the expenditure we did in the long-term plan. And I think it's important to realise how perilous our essential services are in so many areas. Right, end of statement.
Okay, thank you. Very well said. Anyone else? Okay, so we will actually, that's the last item. And we're only 43 minutes late. So thanks, guys. It's been a pretty full agenda. I think the big thing that we really got to look at, and as I said before, is three waters, and we really need to dig into that, and we got to make an effort to get to these meetings and discuss it and find out the detail. So with that said, thank you very, very much for your attendance, and Ross, you have a good meeting later on. I'm not on that group, so I'll be doing some